Welcome to A Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes, and this afternoon I'm delighted to be joined by Colin. Colin doesn't seem as
That's nearly,
delighted.
that's nearly like as if it was forced there, Paul. I'm
No,
like,
you
I'm
don't seem
delighted.
you don't seem as happy as I am that you're on the
I'm
show
looking at
today.
here at this bleak, horrible weather, Paul, and I'm just delighted to be inside. That's the thing is horrible. Well, saying it's the school holidays this week. That's always when the weather's terrible.
Colin is broadcasting from Greenock, a hotbed of Celtic talent. I am broadcasting from Dalkeith. Where are you watching the show around the globe? We have an audience base now that is stretched far and wide. Massive amount of people watching in Australia these days, Colin. Often on the catch up, depending
Hmm.
on where they are and obviously what time of the day it is. It's always an absolute pleasure to hear from our commenters, our viewers, and we are bridging that gap by going live. And we're going to be going live throughout 2023. Is it a tour? Is it an Acsom tour? If so, what should the tour be called? January has been announced and has sold out. We'll be announcing February very, very soon. The January one sold out before we even announced the fact that the one and only Brian Chalky McClare is our special guest. He is going to regale you with tales in a way that only Chalky can. Because we've had experience of Chalky live, haven't we, Colin? And it was
Yep.
something of an experience. What's your memories of
That's
the Greenock night?
yeah. We had the concern because apparently Chalky's got some good pals down in Greenock. And they were catching up for the first time in a number of years, and that catch up tends to involve a couple of beverages here and there. So we'd heard he'd been basically enjoying himself from about 2:30 that afternoon, but no, ever the professional he turned up, um, was able to regale all the classic stories and get the crowd basically. You could have heard a pin drop when he was telling the story. Everybody was so intrigued to what he had to say. Um, and then, to be fair to him, normally when we've got a guest down, when it was like when it was like us two running it, we'd have to vet the questions. We'd have to run it by everybody to make sure that there was anything that we couldn't say or could say. But no, to be fair to Chalky, he just went, whatever they've asked me, I'll answer.
He did.
And
He did.
it was
The only person
fantastic,
I've
man.
ever seen doing that. The
Aye.
only guest I've seen doing that. The other thing I loved and I remembered is you guys have got the cordless mics at Greenock, and he
Mhm.
just started walking in and amongst the crowd. He would go
Yep.
off the stage and he started going up to people and asking them what they thought. It was brilliant, and it will be brilliant in January. Superb venue, sold out. There are links underneath the video description. If you click on the Acsom ticket link, you can add your name to a waiting list just in case any tickets come up for sale. And I've got to say, there are 50 odd tickets already claimed that are not yet available, Colin. So it has been a popular announcement, and
Mhm.
we will email you in advance of the February gig, give you the first chance to get your tickets for February. So there is a point in getting down there and registering your details. Loads to talk about over the weekend, Colin. You were at the game. I was sitting for 2.5 to 3 hours in traffic because Fife, I don't know.
That's all
Did
you had to
they, did
say.
they,
Just
did they
because
want us?
Faith,
Did they want us to
because Faith.
leave? Are they trying to make us stay in Fife? I'm not sure, but we couldn't get
No,
out.
it's just because Fife hasn't really adapted to the 21st century, Paul.
Oh my goodness! Right, we'll leave it at that, Colin. Celtic back to their best, as the tagline says. 100 Club Forrest. I really want to focus on James A, because I think it's out there. You can check all the previous episodes. We've been supporting James A Forrest. I've
Hmm.
been talking about him since he got his contract. There's a group of players in the squad, and Ange actually pointed this out, that aren't going to be starters. They're not going to start every week, but they're going to contribute. And James Forrest showed how he still can contribute to this football club. And we're going to touch on the refereeing show, because obviously the magic wand that is VAR is going to be introduced and make the poor referees all the better or not. We're going to be talking all about that. Let's start off with Matt O'Reilly, Colin. Matt O'Reilly, who has been moved position due
Hmm.
to the situation we have with Callum McGregor's injury and suspension, because he was suspended last week. And I think O'Reilly has shone. I think he's been brilliant in a kind of deeper lying role. What's your thoughts been on Matt O'Reilly's performance?
Um, it's a difficult one, I think, because I'm not so used to seeing him playing there. I know when we were speaking about it in the chat, there was a lot of discussion about how he played quite a number of games for MK Dons in that position. But I think Matt O'Reilly's been off the boil for a while. I don't think we've seen the best of him. Maybe as far back as the game against Rangers. I think that was the last time we really saw a really solid professional performance from him. Other times, I think he's just been sort of drifting in and out of positions. Maybe it is because he's now playing that deeper role. When I see Callum McGregor playing that deeper role, I see him dropping in, looking to pick up the pass, looking to build the play. But there was a bit at one point, I think it was in the first half, where the big striker for Hibs, who, to be fair, had a terrible game when he was hooked at half time. He was sort of standing in between. It was like him and Boyle, and the two centre halves, obviously, Jens and Carter Vickers. And it was as if O'Reilly just, every time O'Reilly moved, he ended up hiding behind one of the strikers. So the pass wasn't onto him. That's why the passes kept going left. And to be fair, you're getting a lot of joy down our left-hand side, their right-hand side in the first half. But I just don't think he's naturally suited to play in that position. The way I like to see Matt O'Reilly playing is getting on the ball, looking forward, and sort of getting that ball wide or driving onto the ball. I just don't think he's 100% that sort of number six. And he's only, to be fair, he's only in there temporarily. I wouldn't see him there as a full-time replacement for Callum McGregor. But yeah, I think he's playing in there okay. I didn't think he had that much of an influence on the game on Saturday, to be perfectly honest. So maybe I'm seeing it differently.
It is interesting how people view the game differently, Colin. It's that simple. Obviously, I watched it back this morning just so that we could get prepared for this. And it was a massive concern when McGregor, obviously, it was a massive concern when he was going to be missing for a few weeks. And we were talking about, who's going to fill that role. And I just think that O'Reilly, maybe unexpectedly, is the man who's done it. And I've been looking at the way that he's been linking up defence to the wings mainly. And I think he's really fitted in brilliantly. What do you reckon? Bring it in on the comments wherever you're watching A Celtic State of Mind. I'm going to bring in Norben Culshy, who is a regular contributor in the comments field. He says, I'm first up for Don't Have a Clue award. We've all been there. Imagine calling for James Forrest to be let go in January. I remember some of the concerns were, heard this quite a lot, he's injury prone. Remember, that was one of the arguments. Jamesy Forrest is injury prone. And what I said at the time is that if that was the case, we wouldn't be handing him a new deal, which I think was a 4-year deal, Colin. Correct me if I'm wrong. Was it a 4-year deal? 3-year deal?
Three. But I think that a lot of it comes down to the fact that if you look at James Forrest's performance last season, you're sitting there playing him on the left-hand side to accommodate whoever was on the right. Whereas his recent performances, he's been playing down his natural right-hand side position. And before the game on Saturday, you were sitting there thinking, right, we've got a couple of injuries here. Abada's not quite 100% fit. Jota's obviously out for another maybe 1 or 2 games. You're sitting there going, you can actually trust James Forrest to come into that game.
That was a couple of times there you came across a bit Charlie Nick. Sitting there thinking, Colin. That was a couple of times in the same flow. I just thought I would pick you up on that.
Yeah, if I was as good as Charlie Nicholas on the football park, I would take that. No, but genuinely, he's one of those ones where last season when he was coming on, if you seen him down the left-hand side, you thought he's just not going to get into this game. There was very little input from him down that left-hand side, whereas now playing on the right-hand side, he's back to what he knows best. He's getting on, he's taking his man on, he's getting those balls over, and he took his goals at the weekend fantastically well. And it kind of takes you back to the Forest of maybe 3 or 4 seasons ago, where you used to be like, right, get the ball to Forest and he'll give you something. He was a guy that was scoring 20 goals and assisting 20 goals a season at that point. But when you play him out of position, some people can do it, some people can't. James Forrest has just shown that he's not naturally suited out with that right-hand side. But if you play him to his strengths, he's going to contribute something to the squad, and that's exactly what he did on Saturday. I mean, you look at it, Hibs, they should be one of our toughest opponents.
Yeah.
I think Lee Johnson's having a terrible time at it at Hibs. Obviously, he's got quite a few injury concerns that he's dealing with.
He's got a jacket concern as well.
I don't think you're one to talk about jackets, Paul. Come on, that's not fair.
What is the story with the jackets? Because I mean, he's walking about the touchline there like, I don't know, Del Boy, right? And you come back at me because somebody said I wear a jacket like
a Matland jacket,
like, a Matland jacket, like I'm sitting watching Top Gear with my denim jeans on in this jacket. I thought it was a bit harsh. But anyway,
is it harsh on Lee Johnson?
I stopped wearing it. No, but Lee Johnson, as I say, on that touchline, he knows in this world if he's going to sport such attire, he's going to get a pasting, right? Listen, it's probably a beautiful jacket. Maybe just knowing the touchline in 2022.
What was the one that was a boy down south?
The leather thing.
No. The boy Parker. That was he was a Fulham manager for a spell.
Oh yes.
He had a cardigan that was worth about £1,500 or something like that. Oh,
it's obscene.
Too much money and sense.
Oh, obscene. Anyway, it's not the fashion show here, but I thought I'd pick him up on his dress sense. I will come back to him because I listened to his post-match and there's a few things he said in there that I thought were excellent, to be fair. And I know a couple of Hibbies quite close to a State of Mind who have said that some of the stuff that he's been coming out with hasn't been great this season, but I'm going to pick him up on a few points. But we're not going to be moving on from Jamesy Forrest quite yet. As everybody knows, he scored he took his tally up to 100 at the weekend, one of only 30 players to be in that category, to be in that 100 club. I think there's a book or a DVD out, Century Boys. They're used to, I'm sure it was maybe both. Anyway, definitely a book. Century Boys, running through all the legendary Celtic figures who had scored 100 or more goals for the club. He's in that club. He's 31 years of age. Someone tweeted out over the weekend the age of his teammates when he scored his first goal for Celtic. Unbelievable, right? It is scary because I mean he scored his first goal I think 14 years ago.
2011, I think it was.
Was it? He was 17, was he not? 17 when he scored his first goal.
Was it as far back as that? I thought it was 2000 and maybe so that would have been what 2009, 2010.
Listen,
it was under Neil Lennon. I remember that. I remember
it was.
Neil Lennon.
It was against Motherwell, wasn't it?
Yeah, 4-0 victory over
17.
Motherwell.
And you know when you look at it like that, it brings home just how a career of longevity sometimes is taken for granted because he's been there for that entire period. 14 seasons in a row, he has scored a goal for Celtic, which is incredible. Isn't that a record? Someone on the comments field might be able to tell us. He's sitting on 99 assists, Colin.
I thought he had 100 already.
99.
He got his 100 last year.
99. He's on 99.
I thought he got his 100th last season.
Are you just going to mess up my stats today, Colin?
I thought
played...
last season he made his 100th assist for Celtic.
According to Transfermarkt, it's 99. They did get his goals wrong, though.
They got it wrong for poor Declan at the weekend as well.
Yeah, I know.
Although they made up for it.
He did. And another one I'm interested in, though, Colin, is he's going to be a player I would expect very soon to join an illustrious 500 club, which I always bang on about. I love the Celtic history and I love the stats, and that is the 500 club there. The last player to join that club, of course, was Scott Brown.
Mm-hmm.
Just read the names, right? Billy McNeil, Paul McStay, Roy Aitken, Danny McGrain, Pat Bonner, Alec McNair, Scott Brown, Bobby Lennox, Bobby Evans, Jimmy McMenemy, Jimmy Johnson, Tommy Burns. I mean, absolute bona fide Celtic legends. So if anybody tells me that Jamesy Forrest isn't, then you just got to look at the names that he's going to join. I would expect very soon. So he's 49 games away from 500. So
he would have made that one now, to be perfectly honest, Paul, if it wasn't for
last two seasons.
Not even that, his injury concerns kind of earlier in his career. There was times where he was missing sort of 3-4 months at a time, when it was before he was properly diagnosed with the fact that he had what is it that he's got? The sort of bone thing, arthritis, done in both legs. That was the thing. That was what he was diagnosed with. Roughly about the time that Brendan Rodgers as a Claxon, as soon as he took over at Celtic Park, he was moved into getting this specialist treatment, and that's where Celtic got the best 3 years out of him. Under the likes of like Ronnie Dylan and stuff, they tried so many different things, but they couldn't quite get it going for him. And then when Brendan Rodgers came in and they brought the new sports science team in, they went through it. And when you look back to it, he had his best probably 2.5 seasons under Brendan Rodgers because they monitored it properly and they got him up to that level of fitness. You've seen sometimes under other managers where people who struggle with sort of long-term injuries, the likes of Mikey Johnson, they don't get the chance to come back in and get their spot back when they're fit again, or it takes them that bit longer to be fit. What was incredible was the fact that he managed to play maybe, I don't know, was it 50, 60 games in a row without picking up an injury at one point, James Forrest, and it was the longest he'd played through his career. But then again, I think a lot of that comes back to the fact of, we're mentioning that he played his first game at 18. A lot of these players that you see that come in at the age of 18, 19, breaking into the first team and playing consistently from that level, guys like Forrest, Tierney, I can think of maybe a couple others as well, like James McCarthy, James MacArthur. A lot of these players, when they get to their sort of early 30s, they sort of fade out of it a wee bit because of the injuries they pick up at a young age.
They've done there's damage being done, there's no doubt about it, Colin, and I think that when you look at some of these players who play well into their 30s, sometimes even their 40s, I'm talking about across the globe, guys like Paolo Maldini and, dare I say, Ryan Giggs, it's an incredible it's an incredible achievement, because the knocks that you get throughout that career could prevent you from doing it. I'm just having a look at Jamesy Forrest's appearances. So once he's established in the team, so season 1 he makes 2 appearances, season 2 he makes 25. Then he becomes established in his third season, 2011-12, where he makes 43 appearances. But I think the period that you might be looking at, Colin, is there's a period of 4 seasons where he makes 29, 27, 29 and 33. So he's not there or thereabouts. That's the kind of average that you were getting from a near beat on prior to Ange Postecoglou came in. Yeah. Then he goes for a spell, Colin, which again might be post what you were saying, some diagnosis and looking at various other sciences around his training regime. He goes for a period of 4 seasons where he makes 46, 58, 56, 47. So that's a brilliant run, isn't it?
It's like almost twice as many games.
Yeah.
And what would be interesting at that point as well is to see of the games in the previous 4 seasons, how many were starting, how many were coming off the bench compared to that 4 seasons there, because at times he was the first name on the team sheet. He won the Player of the Year, and he probably should have won it 2 or 3 times over that period, because his performances were consistent week in and week out.
It's interesting, it really is, when you start breaking it down, because the 4 seasons where he's making a lot of appearances, his goal return is 8, 17, 17, 16. In the previous 4 seasons, it's 4, 7, 4, 2. So you can see, like you were saying earlier, he'd have been well into the 500s had it not been for these periods of his career. And I guess I said the last 2 seasons. Well, the last 2 seasons, his appearances have been 17, which was in Neil Lennon's final season, and 32 last season. A wee bit more actually than I expected, 32 last season. But like you say, he would have been well into the 500s, and I hope he gets there, because he will be joining an incredible array of talent, from McNeil right down to Tommy Burns. And in the modern day, I mean, yeah, we've got another one in Callum McGregor who will probably join him at some stage in the next couple of seasons as well. But it's an incredible feat, Colin, that you've got a couple of guys like that at Celtic, and one who has just departed, who gave a lot of game time to Hibs prior to coming to Celtic as well, who are bona fide modern day Celtic legends. I mean, what is a legend? You could argue the toss all day long. There's people watching this will be thinking James Forrest isn't a legend, but 500 games for the club. Jimmy McGrory's not in that list, because obviously back then we played a lot less games, but he's not in that list, which is incredible. Having played less, or fewer than rather, 500 games. Now, you mentioned the jacket. No, I mentioned the jacket. You mentioned Lee Johnson. There was a couple of things I picked up on. Tongue in cheek, listen, I bet the jacket, is worth more than my... Yes. quarterly salary. However, the other thing I was going to point out is there's been conversations on here, on various discussions elsewhere around Ryan Porteous, right? And I get that he played well for Scotland not that long ago. I've never been a fan, and I've said it on this, and I'm in Dalkeith, so I'm saying it in such a way that, I might bump into him in
literally
Tesco.
be next door,
Yeah, I might bump into him at the garage tonight, but I've never thought that he was a player. Because I'm talking about, can a player step up and play for Celtic? And this is a discussion, right? Because you go into these games, and often a player will consistently perform impress against Celtic, and you think, well, can he make that step up? And over the years, we have had loads of players who have made the step up, Colin. Not every one of them has been a success. And the name Ryan Porteous, and previous to that, I think, was it Scott McKenna at Aberdeen was getting mentioned about coming to Celtic. So I've watched Porteous closely. I've spoken to the Hibs fans that I know who regard them very, very highly, it's got to be said. And I've never held him in such high regard. And I think when I watched that game at the weekend, wasn't that impressed with his performance, but I also didn't like the way he went about his business with Giakoumakis. And I think that when players do that, I hate seeing that. When a player's down on the ground, injured or otherwise, and they're over him. Remember it happened with Naismith and Johnny Hayes.
It's not the first time he's done it either.
No, I don't like it. I don't like it. But that's what I was going to say. I think that shatters any illusion that he is a player that Celtic should be interested in.
I keep hearing this. He's a no-risk signing because he's 23. He's a Scotland international. He'd basically be able to be picked up on a free in January. But we're talking about guys like Stephen Welsh, who's 23.
Great.
Who would you rather have in that squad? Would you rather have Stephen Welsh or would you rather have Ryan Porteous? Now, if I'm going to sign a centre-half for Celtic just now, I want a centre-half that comes in and replaces either Moritz Jens or Cameron Carter-Vickers, because I want the squad depth. I'm not looking for someone who can come in and play second fiddle to them. I'm not wanting somebody that's going to come in and be behind Starfelt or be behind Welsh. As it stands just now, I want the only players that's going to come in to improve that first 11. Because if they improve the first 11, it'll in turn improve the general squad overall.
Yeah. If
you take someone who is playing week in, week out and replace them with someone better, it only makes the squad depth better as well. So Ryan Porteous for me would be on the same level as Stephen Welsh. He's probably got a bit more experience than Stephen Welsh, but would I play either of the two of them ahead of what we've got in front of us just now? No. So this kind of low risk, low fee transfer, what's the point? It's just bringing another player in to put him on the wage bill, and we'll maybe potentially get 5-10 games out of him. That's it.
Well, I think that the fact you brought up Stephen Welsh is a good point, because I don't think he's better than Stephen Welsh. I'd be interested to hear anybody's thoughts in the comments field. Is a guy like Ryan Porteous any better than Welsh? No.
Well, I tell you what, it's interesting, right? So you take a look at it, you're saying, is he any better than Stephen Welsh? You take a look at the Scotland squad, Stephen Welsh isn't even getting a sniff in, whereas Ryan Porteous is. But a lot of this comes down to the fact that Porteous is playing week in and week out.
But Lewis Morgan's not getting a sniff.
Well,
in the Scotland squads, Colin.
I don't think that Stevie Clark's got the ability to watch MLS games, because there's a few players out there that could potentially get a look in.
Ryan Gold was talking about it during the week, wasn't he? Ryan Gold saying that it's maybe a thing where he's based is working against them. The only player that seems to be getting a sniff at the minute is Jack Hendry. Because even Liam Henderson is performing
50
at
games
a very high level. Yep.
When you take a look at it, right, so obviously Welsh is not playing week in, week out for Celtic. There's going to be guys that you take a look at across the league who are getting called into that Scotland squad because they are playing week in, week out, or will be playing week in, week out. I mean, John Souttar was in there before him. Is he a better defender than Stephen Welsh? There was players like that were getting called up.
Look how long it took for Ralston to get in.
Exactly. At one point we had, what do you call him? Him that scored the OG last week. Was at Aberdeen, now he's at St Johnstone. Considine was getting in there as well. And obviously Stephen Welsh was, I think he was captain of the Scotland under 21s at that point.
Yeah.
But to make that step up from being under 21s to playing for your national team, you've got to be playing week in and week out. And this is where people think I'm having a go at Stephen Welsh every time I say this. I'm not. Genuinely, for his career, he is going to need to either go out on loan or he's going to have to leave Celtic if he wants to progress.
See
Because
when
he's not getting that opportunity.
See when there was the scenario where obviously we were down to the bare bones at centre half, Colin, and we were playing Welsh and Yents. I said a couple of times on the Acsom Bulletin that I didn't have concerns about them as individuals, but as a partnership, I didn't rate them as a partnership. And then we were kind of hoping and praying for the return of Carter Vickers, and that has happened. When Carter Vickers came back in, now, listen, try and rewind because Jens has played very, very well.
Yep.
Who would you have picked at that point? Did you think there was much between Jens and Welsh at that point?
Individually, no. But obviously, Ange knows the experience of having those two playing alongside each other. And it suited the team a lot better. Welsh, he has shown, I mean, when you take a look back to when he had that sort of consistent run of games in Neil Lennon's last season, at times you're watching the games and he was telling the players where to be, where to position themselves. So he does have that sort of leadership experience of playing at the back. However, when you look at players like Cameron Carter-Vickers, Maurice Jens, Carl Starfelt, technically they're just better players. And that's no dig at Stephen Welsh. They are just better players. They have more experience under their belt at playing at that sort of top level. Now, all I'm saying is Stephen Welsh, if he was to go out and have a loan spell for 6 months, 12 months, and be playing as the number one choice centre-back for a team week in and week out, he will develop. But at Celtic just now, I think his progress is stagnating because he is the backup option. He is the option where we've got 2 or 3 injuries, we've got to throw in Stephen Welsh. He's and I'm not comparing their ability, but he is almost like the modern day Darren O'Day.
See the situation with Welsh. We'll get on to Jens in a minute. It will lead on nicely to Maurice Jens. But I look at the fact that Welsh scores very highly in stats and in data. His on-ball value, which is one of the buzzwords that you hear in the stat world, OBV, when he gets the ball and how well he uses that in terms of Celtic creating and scoring chances, and him being part of that is astronomically high. And he scores high on a lot of these charts, which I think is the reason why he's had some interest from France and also from Italy.
Yeah.
And then I think, though, that when the interest has happened, Celtic have not been in a good position because although I think game time would be absolutely crucial for Stephen Welsh's development, and he is currently the 4th choice defender if you look at the way that Ange has selected the team. At the same time, Colin, I don't think we've been in a good position every time someone's came in for him.
No.
Because of the situation that we were in with Julien. That may change, but I wouldn't obviously be confident in allowing Welsh to go unless we had another centre half. There's no way we could do it right now because a couple of injuries and you're right down to the bare bones. I think Stephen Welsh has got a future at Celtic. I would like to see him getting more games. I mean, Mikey Johnson, written off time and time again, scored a couple of goals at the weekend. That kind of thing, coming back as a player with confidence in the games and the experience under your belt, Colin, can work wonders. I mean, there's great examples with Chris Ayer and Kyle McGregor, Ryan Christie. There are great examples that Celtic have utilised the loan market. I just don't think we've been in a position to allow Stephen Welsh to go in the last couple of seasons.
I think this is where you probably miss having a reserve league, isn't it?
Yeah, yep.
When you look at the kind of squad depth that Celtic's got just now and try to get some players some run-out minutes, yeah, okay, the reserve league was traditionally about bringing in like your sort of young players. We saw obviously Karamoko Dembele making his debut at 13, 14 for the reserve team. We've seen other players kind of making that step up as well across the leagues. I remember, I think one of the last reserve leagues was won by a Ross County team whose average age was about 16 or 17. So it does show that it is meant to be a youth development thing, but you go back to the sort of era maybe when you started going to the games, Paul, and you think that the amount
Jimmy McGrory wasn't playing.
Now, I'm not going that far back, but you think maybe that Celtic were playing at, I don't know, Easter Road, so the reverse fixture would be that Hibs would be travelling to Barrafield, or they'd be travelling to Celtic Park to play in the reserve game, and you'd still see crowds of 15, 20,000 going to the reserve game, because you had guys like Kenny Dalglish coming through, you had guys like Frank McAvenny playing in these games, and players that were coming back from injury as well, maybe a Danny McGrains who'd been out for a while, getting that minutes in the legs. We're speaking about guys like Stephen Welsh, who would probably be playing week in and week out for that team, and it would mean that the fact that they're playing 90 minutes against a decent level of opposition would mean that when they're coming into big games where you're sort of struggling for injuries, you're not saying, oh, he's coming in out the cold. It worked a lot for someone like, in recent years, Paddy McCourt. Paddy McCourt was a regular for the reserve team, and you just knew that if he played the Thursday and he came off after 60 minutes, you're thinking he's going to be involved in the squad on the Saturday.
It was vital. It was a vital key element of development for a long, long time. It worked well in Scotland, and everyone who remembers it always speaks fondly of it. Players and fans. The issue that there was in Scotland is that loads of the clubs couldn't afford it, because there was I think by the time it was wound up, Colin, there was an annual cost. By the way, 5-figure cost, but a lot of clubs couldn't afford that. So we're in a situation now where there will never be a return to a Scottish Reserve League, because financially not enough clubs will be able to buy into it. But I think there is a way of having a B team in the pyramid which will work better than what we have presently. But Celtic are in a situation where we can't say, right, I want a B team in the second tier of Scottish football where any age group can play, although there needs to be a quota of, let's say, teenagers, and there can be no promotion. We've never been in that position, so we've had to go in at the fifth tier level, and it's not working. But what would eventually benefit Celtic is if, like in Spain and various other countries, and they've done it for generations, we would have a team playing at a high level where not only are you bringing through guys like Rocco Vata, you can also play Stephen Welsh, you can also play Chris Jullien last season when he's not getting game time. Mm-hmm. And until that time happens, until there's a structure in place where we can be at a high enough level, and I'm not saying we should just be parachuted into that level, we would need to work up to it, which hopefully will be allowed eventually. I just can't see the benefit, because it is kids playing at a level where if they are needed, you can't expect them to jump from tier 5 to the top division.
I agree with you to an extent on that. I wouldn't necessarily say that the B team experiment isn't working just now. I think it's very difficult to judge something when it's sort of in its infancy still. Obviously, it was there last year and this year, but we are seeing these players are now making that step up to their under-19s and under-21 squads. They are playing up at the sort of highest level in the UEFA Europa League, UEFA Youth League this season, getting some fairly decent results, including the victory over Leipzig a couple of weeks ago. I think for an under-19s team, that isn't a bad experiment. But not for a B team or a reserve team. I mean, you're talking about guys like Ideguchi coming back into the frame, who's been out for months and months. Having that opportunity to play a bounce game.
It's your goalies as well, Colin. Your keepers. Yeah. You know, they can go virtually a whole season. Yeah. Get them games. And by the way, another thing that we should look at is a feeder club. You've got a feeder club with half a dozen players at a club every single season. You know, and it works. Yeah. It works across the board. But again, obviously, that's quite an in-depth discussion, and we'll keep tapping into it. I did go into the Raya Porteous thing, and that's what moved us on to the Stephen Welsh discussion and developing players, which has led to this. But the reason that I wanted to talk about the Hibs gaffer is after the game, he did speak about, you know, my players should be banging on that door to find out how Celtic can play the way they play. You know, if you were a player who wanted to improve, you'd want to know, how does Kyogo and Hatate prepare for a game, Colin? And he was talking about diet and preparation and all this kind of stuff. And I think that was a compliment to the way Celtic went about their business from Johnson. I think that you've got to take that as a compliment, because some of these players and managers coming to Celtic Park, when Celtic are on that form, must feel as though the gap is so wide. You know, when we're pumping Dundee United 9-0 at Tannadice, and we're beating, Ross County, historically, traditionally, a very, very difficult game. We're going and we're turning them over, and we're beating Hibs 6-1 at home. These clubs must be looking at Celtic sometimes, like, not this season, by the way, but sometimes the way we've looked at clubs in the Champions League, thinking we'll never attain that level. When Celtic are at their best, because I know that we are party to a poor result here and there. And there's been a couple of bad performances in recent weeks.
The thing that annoyed me as much as he was coming out saying, I want my players to be playing at that level, was he turned around and says, every single one of those goals were avoidable. And you're saying, well, if that's the case, then every goal's avoidable.
Exactly. The Modric goal was avoidable, but it was it was just brilliant.
I think he's not going to come out and throw his players under the bus. It would be very difficult to do that. And it's almost as if it's like a sort of, I've got to give him a compliment because they've turned us over here. I don't think he is one to sort of do that. They'd been on a fairly decent run for a couple of weeks before they came to Celtic Park. I think they'd beat Aberdeen 3-1. They'd lost a previous game before they came here, but when you look at it, it's like, I don't know. They're such a hit and miss team. And for me, you look at that team that sort of lined up against us on Saturday, and I'm sitting going, quite a few players I don't recognise in that Hibs team. I didn't think they had much of an attacking outlet. As much as they did try and close us down, they sort of bounced back, and that big guy up front for them, he was hooked at half time when he barely touched the ball. I think he had 2 touches of the ball, and that was it. That's a testament to how good Celtic are playing. And it was a performance for me, considering our previous performances over the last couple of weeks, it was unexpected. But for me, the person that all came down to was Aaron Moy. I thought Aaron Moy was absolutely outstanding at the weekend.
It was brilliant.
And it showed you exactly what he can bring to that Celtic squad.
Yeah, and it shows exactly why Ange brought him to the Celtic team. I mean, he set up 2 goals. He's never rushed, Colin. That's what I like about him. And I know sometimes you're always driving forward. He doesn't mind just turning around and putting the ball back. He doesn't mind doing that because he knows that he can build the attack again. He set up at least 2 goals. I think that a lot of the doubters have got it in their mind, this guy was a bad signing, it was, all this kind of stuff. And they might not change the view on that. And I know he didn't play well against St Mirren, but who did, Colin? That was a bad day at the office. I thought that was his probably his finest game in a Celtic jersey so far. And he's in a group of players now who, again, are like Forrest, who are not going to be, your first picks, but they're going to play a part this season. I think McCarthy falls into that category. Ideguchi, hopefully, if we can get him up to fitness, will fall into that category. Guys that, when you need them, you can rely on them to come in, and they might only be making 25 or 30 appearances, mainly from the bench, throughout the entire season, Colin. But that's vital, and I think Ange has spoken about it, hasn't he? He says you bring certain types of players to play different roles. Moy's one of the guys. And by the way, he could get dropped in for the next game, and he'll probably just get on with his business in the professional manner that he has done since he got here.
And the thing is as well about him was he almost strolled that game. Yeah, first couple of minutes he gave the ball away, but then after that I felt as if he was always the one looking for the ball. He was always the one that was in almost where that Callum McGregor role should have been, and I think that's maybe why I didn't see so much of Matt O'Reilly in there on Saturday, because how efficient it was seeing someone like Aaron Moy getting involved in the game, and his passes were outstanding.
Yeah, they were.
He showed some technically incredible skill. It's one of those games, though, I guess, when you're sort of playing a team that after maybe the 3rd or 4th goal, they sort of did chuck it. They didn't really get back into the game. But just to have that ability for someone who's not played consistently for what? Maybe not played for about 6 months, 8 months consistently.
I think January. He was without a club since January, wasn't he, when he signed for Celtic? Yeah.
He's obviously played a couple of times for his country. He played 120 minutes, I think, in a qualifier as well. But I was surprised to get 90 minutes out of him, and I thought he did really, really well.
He did.
And he almost looks as if he's not breaking a sweat in that midfield either.
He did look very, very good, very composed, and he's got that experience as well. I think that he's going to be key at various points during the season. I'm keen to bring in some of your comments, ladies and gents. Brian Lennon, good afternoon, guys. Pity I get to listen to you guys live through COVID. Usually it's on my way home from work on YouTube. Well, I'm glad that you're joining us, Brian, and thank you for getting involved in the chat. What's your thoughts on the discussion points so far today? We've got Alan Robertson, greetings from Turkey, over there enjoying the sunshine, whilst Colin Watt is in Greenock. Matthew Granger, 10:30pm here in Sydney. Luckily the vids and games are usually on at decent times. Absolutely brilliant to hear that you're tuning in from Australia. And Helen McCallum, who pops up on a regular basis, amazing on Saturday. Bring on Motherwell. We'll have a wee chat. We'll have a look ahead to Motherwell. There's loads more to talk about as well. And as I say, keep bringing the comments in. We will bring you in as much as possible this afternoon.
Just as well, Paul, seeing in the comment section that some people are having some technical difficulties, can say on our side it's definitely not here. So if it's on YouTube, refresh, come back in. It seems to be working for most people, but the gremlins definitely don't seem to be coming from our side here, Paul.
No, everything's running smoothly. I wasn't aware if anybody has been having issues. Everything is smooth from this end. Jens, I need to talk about Maurice Jens, right? So we bring him in. Similarly, last season in the summer transfer window, we bring in a lone centre half, Colin, because we were in a situation where we had to offload Chris Julian. So very, very similar, Maurice Jens. I'm not comparing the player Jens with Carter Vickers, but the scenario was similar. We heard a lot from the likes of Matt O'Reilly because he was an ex-teammate of Jens. We'd heard from Peter Grant, who had coached both O'Reilly and Jens at Fulham. So I was looking to him and thinking, well, he seems to have the attributes. He had a poor season, I think, or a disappointing season in Germany, hence the reason he was allowed to come out on loan. I think we've had a mixed bag from Jens up until recently, but since Carter Vickers came back into the side, I think he's been excellent. And he stood out, for me, at the weekend. I've been going on, I'm no tactical genius by any manner or means, Colin, but something that was frustrating me about the Jens and Welsh partnership was the lack of balls out to the wings, directly to the wings. And if you look at the map of passes, most of the passes were going from the centre halves to the fullbacks. Yeah. And that was their go-to pass. What you've seen at the weekend, very, very effectively, was Jens breaking that line and going straight to Haksabanovic mainly. On one occasion, the ball was actually intercepted, but we regained possession, and that's when, obviously, Moy set up, I think it was the fourth goal. But the first 3 goals started with Jens, and through balls from Jens. I thought he was outstanding at the weekend, Colin. And, Carter Vickers and Staffeld's our first pick partnership, but I think Jens has done himself absolutely no harm with that performance at the weekend.
Yeah, 100%. And look, he is going to have some of his own frailties, as are probably most players at Celtic, because if they were as good as the performances as they put in and didn't put a foot wrong, they wouldn't be at Celtic. They'd be at a higher level.
You're right. Jota, Carter Vickers, these guys needed a move at the time that we got them, Colin. They're absolutely tremendous footballers, but their careers weren't going in the path that they had envisaged when maybe they were 17 or 18.
Even someone like Joe Hart. If Joe Hart was still playing at the level that he did under the likes of Pellegrini at Man City, he wouldn't be at Celtic. He'd still probably be at City. So when you take a look at it, these players are going to have bits in their game that they need to work on, they need to develop. But I thought definitely on Saturday, Maurice Jens was absolutely superb.
And his go-to pass is Haksabanovic, yeah. He loves that pass to Haksabanovic down the left.
There was a bit in the second half, I think it was, where they were right in at the corner flag. And I think it was Ralston, Jens, I can't remember who else played in this sort of triangle. But normally, 9 times out of 10, what you'd see is you'd see the centre-half trying to clear it up the park, giving away a throw-in maybe 20, 30 yards from his own goal, or it would go straight into Rosed and everybody would sort of regain their position. We played it out from that position. It went for Ralston to Jens, into whoever it was. I think it was maybe Moy that had dropped that far back, and it built out from there, and it almost created something down the other end of the park. And I think that's obviously it's part of how Ange Postecoglou wants to set up his Celtic team, is to play out like that. But just having that confidence and being able to do so, especially when we're saying maybe 2 weeks ago he didn't suit that partnership with Welsh, people are going to find that they'll get a partnership that suits each other.
Yeah.
I mean, you go back to someone like Virgil van Dijk could play with anybody, could play with
I
absolutely
liked him with
anybody.
Denier. I liked him
Yeah.
with Denier.
So this is where I was going. You go to Denier, and Denier's career, if he was on, at times you were thinking he was on the same trajectory as Virgil van Dijk because of how well they played together. Obviously, he made his move to Lyon, he went to Sunderland, he went to another couple of places. Now I think he's playing in the Arab League. He made a free transfer there maybe a week or two ago. A couple of people were saying maybe we should have brought him back. But that's how good Virgil van Dijk made him look. And I think when you've got the right partnership, you can see the two of them really look well. And I think for me, a lot of that comes down to the Cameron influence of having someone like Cameron Carter-Vickers playing alongside Maurice Jens. I think as soon as you bring someone like that into the team, he goes sort of from this level to that level. And it's the trust that they've got behind them as well, knowing that and just as Mark E saying here, CTV and Jens are my first choice centre backs. The first person on that team sheet for me every single week is Cameron Carter-Vickers. I think we've got him for an absolute steal. He's still very young as well. And I think he'll develop into a fantastic centre half going forward. I wouldn't be surprised if in 5-6 years he's probably playing at a very decent level down in the English Premiership.
I wouldn't be surprised either. It's interesting, Marky, looking at the first choice centre backs. Listen, it'll be brilliant when Starfelt's back because it just gives you that strength, doesn't it?
It'd be another option as well. See, sometimes when you're playing games, maybe against a kind of lower team at home, and you're quite comfortable, to go to that three at the back, to bring in someone like Starfelt, which means you don't need the number 6 because you've got the 3 playing at centre half, you've got the 2 full backs who just love to bomb forward. The work rate from Bernabe and Ralston at the weekend was absolutely outstanding. And I feel as if they were more in their own half, in the opposition half than what they were in their own half. Yeah. And playing that 3 at the back behind them would perhaps cover that if that was needed. And you could maybe go with the 2 up top, because that 2 up top for maybe 5-10 minutes when it did happen with Kyogo and Giakoumakis was actually quite impressive. Giakoumakis scored, Kyogo hit one off the post. It would be good to see a wee bit more of that, just to see if it's another option and another sort of plan that we can go to.
It'll be interesting. I mean, Craig, anyone know what the fee to buy is for Jens? That'll be interesting to see that.
£2 million, I think it was, maybe £3-4 million.
It'd be another brilliant bargain. Now, Angela, I've got to admit, Ange sometimes coughs, PJ sometimes rubs his eyebrow. A habit. I didn't even know I was doing it, but now I've got an itchy eyebrow and I'm scared to rub it. There you go. Yeah, absolutely. I thought Jens was superb. His favoured pass was Haksabanovic down the left. He's a guy that we've been speaking in glowing terms about. Said Haksabanovic, Colin. Ange Postecoglou said he wanted to play, had a wee niggle with his ankle. He wanted to play, and he took him off once the job was done. So the job was done at half time, and Haksabanovic comes off. I don't think we've seen the best of this guy. I think he can be a revelation at Celtic.
Yeah, absolutely. That cross for James Forrest for the first goal, that's class. That's absolute class. And again, we're speaking about players who, if they didn't have some deficiencies to their game, then they wouldn't be at Celtic. And I think Haksabanovic is another one. I think, obviously, the first couple of games we saw him come in, he looked a bit heavy on his touch. His decision-making wasn't great. But then you see a performance like that on Saturday, even those 45 minutes, and he was just another level. I just pictured what it would have been like if he had Haksabanovic down the left, Jota down the right. It would have put some of those Hibs players in an early bath. I'm surprised that there wasn't any more fouls given than what there was, and we've not touched on the referee performance yet, despite we saying that we would. But he was just, for me, he's one of those players that's looked so comfortable in that number 10 role this season, and I was impressed with him on the left again on Saturday. His first thought isn't, who do I play this ball to? His first thought is, that's a guy that's marking me, I'm going to take him on. And I'm going to get past him. Mm-hmm. Yeah. You saw that in Europe as well, and I think it's one of those ones where I'll be interested to see what he's got to his game in terms of shooting, because I've not seen that really yet from him. He's been very selfless in trying to pick out other players. But I'd like to see what he could do from maybe 25, 30 yards to see if he could maybe offer that, because I don't think we have a lot of that in the team just now.
See, when you were talking there about the prospect of having Haksabanovic and Jota flying down the wings, I don't think we've actually seen a situation so far where all our top players have all been hitting the heights at the same time. And I think when that happens, right, it's going to be a frightening proposition. I would love to see it happening in Europe, but if we come up against a team like Hibs at the weekend there and everybody's flying, then we can tear strips off just about everybody in this domestic competition, Colin.
It's interesting when you look at it and you think back to that performance against Dundee United. What was your better performance as a team? Was it the 9-0 victory, or was it that performance on Saturday? Because I think it was very, very close. Although we scored the 9 against Dundee United, there was still better parts of play on Saturday, and if it wasn't for David Marshall, I know he threw one in the back of the net, it could have been 9 quite comfortably on Saturday as well.
And there'll be other occasions this season, Colin. There will be other occasions. We're going for 7 at the weekend, where we're going for 10 at Tannadice. There are going to be occasions where we're sitting here thinking it could be anything, because it clicks, Kyogo and Hatate and O'Reilly with Haksabanovic and Jota, Abada, never even mentioned Abada. These guys have it all clicks at the same time. Frightening prospect. I want to get on to Bernabe. You've already mentioned him, but before I do so, Yorgos Giacomakis, GG as we call him, which I think is an acronym for goals galore. Now look at some of these. Stats, right? 27 years of age. He's actually 28 in December. We picked him up for little over £2 million when he had been the top goal scorer in the top league in the Netherlands the previous season. Everybody was telling us, but most of the goals were from the penalty spot. He was a top goal scorer for a team who was relegated from the league. Anthony Joseph, who you have interviewed on the channel, he revealed that had the club stayed in the league, the asking price for Giacomakis was €12 million.
Yep.
We pick him up for $2 million. Unbelievable bit of business. If you look at the full complement over the 2 seasons of games that he's played, and you break it down to the minutes, Colin, he has scored or assisted in creating a goal every 85 minutes that he's been on the park, right? And by the way, he's only assisted 1 goal. So that's virtually his goal scoring record. He's scoring a goal a game if you're looking at the minutes.
And you're looking at it as well as the amount of touches that he takes to score those goals as well.
I know.
I mean, scary. Even that second goal at the weekend that he scored, okay, it sort of took the deflection off Bashiri and went through his legs, but ridiculous. It's a first-time finish. He's so confident when he gets in the ball, and he throws himself about. The first goal, absolutely outstanding. To put it in the sort of top bag. There was a bit on Sportscene. I watched the highlights back on Sportscene, and it just showed you that he's not the quickest. And obviously, Porteous, and I don't know who else is playing alongside him before. He gets subbed at half-time as well, the other centre-half. But he just kind of drops his shoulder into them just to kind of get a wee bit of space to give him the opportunity to get on the end of that ball. And it's just that experience of playing up front and that experience of being the sort of lead target man up front that works really well for him. I mean, how many goals is that he's actually got now? He must be, coming up for 30 goals for Celtic?
23.
Is that all?
Goals.
I thought he had more than that.
Yeah.
I thought he had
but
more
remember,
than that.
He missed a massive part of last season.
Yeah. I did think he had a wee bit more than that, but even at that, I mean, considering that, as you say, you pick him up for £2 million, you're talking, £100,000 a goal already, and that's only going to go down. Some players that you've signed previously for this sort of £2-3 million money, you're talking it was almost £2-3 million a goal. Guys like Bayo and players like that, although fair play to Bayo, he seems to have found his level down at Watford, and if he scores another sort of, I don't know, maybe 5 goals for them, he'll end up moving for about £30 million.
That will be scary.
That's scary, isn't it?
That will be scary, absolutely. Daniel Pincus, hi from Sydney, Australia. Thanks for tuning in, Daniel, and thank you to Keith as well. He's been a long-time supporter of Acsom. Afternoon all from Plymouth. I thought CCV and Yents were superb. I totally agree with that. I like seeing McCarthy come on. He can do a job. James Forrest, fantastic. What a servant for the boys. I think you put McCarthy into the same category as Forrest and Gucci, and these are the types of players in Moy who will come in and play their part this season, Colin. But this does lead us on to the James Forrest thing. I want to mention Frank McGarvey here because I don't mind admitting that was very, very emotional to see Frank on the park before the game, Colin. He's a man who I've had the absolute pleasure of getting pretty close to over the last few years because Acsom sponsors the Greats team, the old Celtic Greats or the Old Heads, and as part of that sponsorship I was allowed to play. I don't know if you ever got to any of the games, but Frank McGarvey is the gaffer of that team, and he put us through our paces, put me on a diet, told me to get fit, and the way that only Frank can, which is probably why Ange mentioned the fact that he was telling Ange how to manage Celtic at the weekend. Absolutely superb to see him back at Celtic Park. Very emotional as well, Colin. He's a legend. He's in the 100 club, and he thanked the Celtic support for all our best wishes that he's received since his cancer diagnosis.
There was some really touching words from Ange Postecoglou after the game as well on Frank McGarvey, and obviously talking about how Ange had followed both Liverpool and Celtic when he was younger because of the sort of connection with Kenny Dalglish. Kenny Dalglish being one of his most favourite players, and then obviously McGarvey making that move to Celtic as well from there, and being able to sort of follow these players' careers, and you can tell there's a genuine sort of admiration from Ange for these players as well. On going back to the whole, this is what he grew up watching, and it's the same for us. If I was to ever be fortunate enough to be in Ange's position and the likes of Henrik Larsson wanted to come down and do a talk at training, I would never stop that man doing that. He was a hero of mine growing up. The same way that Ange is now looking at some of his heroes coming down and looking to have a word. As you say, I think he gave a team talk just before the players went onto the park, and he was saying, you better score in the first 20 minutes. Well, thankfully, I think we put 3 down in the first 20 minutes, so that was nice of him. And yeah, I don't know exactly how fit Frank is, and I don't know how far on his diagnosis is. I hope it's not as bad as I felt it was when he walked off the park, because I felt when he walked off the park that was almost his farewell to the Celtic support. I don't know if anyone else felt like that. Obviously, I don't know what it's like, but you could see him. He was very, very emotional. He didn't really want to say much, but I just kind of felt that he was wanting his last opportunity to do so, and I hope that's not the case. I hope that he bounces back and he comes back fit, and he is a true Celtic legend, and we're losing far too many of them. So I hope that it's not as bad as the way I felt it was when he walked off the park.
He is fighting. Frank is fighting, and he's a fighter. And Donny boy, good to see you. Just wanted to say that as well. He is a fighter, and I think that with Frank, he's such a funny guy. Such a funny guy. And, like, he would do things, Colin, like when he's picking a team, and he would send us out, and we had maybe 10 players on the park, maybe 13 players on the park, and then you would say to somebody, where are you playing? Don't know. He never told me where I was playing. And he gave a team talk one time, and we used to play the games in the junior parks, and Simon Ferry was in the dressing room. I don't know why, but Simon Ferry was in the dressing room as well, and it was just like, it was a tag team between they two, and you're in stitches before you went on the park. It was just an absolute honour to play in the games, and I look forward to seeing Frank very, very soon. Yeah, he is an absolute Celtic legend. He scored over 100 goals. It was just that it was a shame the way things finished for him at Celtic. Scores with his last touch of the ball. He headers the winning goal in the 1985 Scottish Cup final against Dundee United, and he never played for Celtic again after that. He went to St Mirren and he had success at St Mirren. He's an absolute legendary character, and our thoughts and prayers are still with you, Frank. Keep fighting, pal. Before we go, shocking refereeing show. I think that's not too strong. I thought the refereeing at the weekend was abysmal. I think we're in a situation that, VAR's coming in, but is it going to make anything better? People going about incompetence. I look at some of the decisions, and I mean, the guy was booed off the park, and he's got previous for it. We know Stephen McLean's name will forever be associated with the Ronnie Dyler treble that never was, Inverness Cali, Josh Meekins handball. The guy, he's a fraud. He's a fraud with that performance at the weekend, and that is my absolutely honest opinion, Colin. You were saying before we came on, he wasn't as bad as the ref last week, but I mean, the refereeing performances have been abysmal.
But I think there's a very, very poor standard of refereeing in Scottish football just now, and it goes right across the board. It's not just Celtic games, it's not just Rangers games, it's not just the sort of top level. You take a look at them, and there is some ridiculous decisions going on across Scottish football. Now, I was told the other day by someone who's still active in the game that a lot of these sort of referees who were previously Category 2 referees, or referees that were about to step down into Category 2, have been asked to stay on and be Category 1 referees as it stands, because you need a Category 1 referee to do the VAR. So we're talking about how VAR might change things. I don't think so. It's the same sort of referees that's on it. I just think they're absolutely dreadful. The standard across Scotland is very, very poor. And if they ever want to do something about it, the first thing they need to do is bring in some referees from other leagues to train ours up at least. That's the very least they can do, because it's just, it can ruin the quality of a game at times. Mm-hmm. You're trying to sell this to advertisers, and then you get things like watching things back and you're saying the referee made 12 decisions and 10 of them were wrong. How can that be? It's not the easiest job in the world, I get that, but...
no, it's no, Colin, but we do it so badly. And people are putting in suggestions, bringing referees nationwide. Absolutely, there could be a pool of referees that we tap into, which has been another suggestion that's been made previously. Professional refs, 100%. I buy into that. But it's all about accountability for me. I mean, you have an absolutely horrific performance as McLean did at the weekend. Where's the accountability? The head of referees comes out because Kyogo beat an offside trap. Where's he coming out at the weekend there for that decision when Bernabe breaks through, cuts the ball back, and no one can explain to me why the play was stopped.
No, and see, the thing is as well, right? We had, and as much as he isn't a popular character in these sort of discussions, we had someone like Hugh Dallas, who for a number of years was a top-level UEFA official. He was given so many different games in the Champions League. He was given so many different games at World Cups and European Championships. And was he the best referee? For us, there's a lot to be said, especially after stuff that came out after it, right? But he was recognised at a UEFA level. When was the last time we saw a Scottish referee go into a European Championships, taking charge of a Champions League game, or being involved in the World Cup? Now, I think it was it the Qatari League who brought in the guy Clattenburg from the English game. He sort of retired to go over there to train the referees up. They've got the World Cup this year, and there's a Qatari referee, and there's not a Scottish referee.
Well, that just shows you the poor quality of the refs that we've got at our disposal, Colin. It really does.
It is absolutely ridiculous how bad the refereeing is. And if we want to improve the standard of football, that has to change, and it has to change fast.
Absolutely is. We will continue to comment on VAR, its introduction, even though the powers that be tell us that there's going to be teething problems. It was interesting. Dalglish came out at the weekend. Kenny Dalglish saying why, why should there be teething problems? I would veer on the side of Kenny Dalglish on that one.
Here's one for you, Paul. Right, sorry to interrupt. VAR comes in. We still don't have goal line technology. So there wasn't anything to suggest to Stephen McLean on Saturday that ball was over the line. And I still haven't seen a full, complete angle replay that sells me that ball's 100% over the line.
Celtic TV, the highlights package, it's about 9 minutes long. There's a brilliant angle, Colin.
I've not seen it. I've not seen that one.
Aye, and that shows you that there's no question. It's quite a bit over the line. Actually, it hits the deck before he scoops it away, and it's over the line by quite a distance.
But I mean, it's things like that. Why haven't we had goal line technology? It's been available, and it's not exactly expensive. It's in leagues that have got less money in it than what we have.
We need to prioritise the technology to ensure that we've got as much chance as possible of getting the right decision. And that's what it comes down to, Colin. And it will be interesting to see that. But I go back to what I said. Shocking refereeing performance at the weekend by McLean. And the standard just isn't getting any better. We've run a wee bit over, Colin. That's probably your gaffer saying what you're doing on that broadcast. I've got to thank everybody for getting involved all over the globe. It's an absolute pleasure to join you at 12:30 every single weekday. We'll be covering the games obviously this week as well, and it's always a pleasure to be joined by Colin Watt. Thank you all for joining us on A Celtic State of Mind.